Well, here we go. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 13. For the Lord's sake, submit to all human authority, whether the king as head of the state or the officials he has appointed. For the king has set there to punish those who do wrong and honor those who do right. It's God's will that your honorable lives should silence those ignorant people who make foolish accusations about you. For you are free, yet you are God's slaves. So don't use freedom as an excuse to do evil. Respect everyone, love the family of believers, fear God, and respect the king. How about that? So that means that if on your Facebook page it says Biden is an idiot, you probably need to delete it. Or if on your Instagram page it says Trump is an idiot, you probably need to delete it. I got to be honest with you, I kind of agree with both of those statements. And they have slipped out of my mouth a couple times. And every time one of those two statements slips out of my mouth, it just feels wrong. Anybody else? I just feel immature when I say it. But then when I read this passage, it scares me because maybe it's more than mature. Maybe it's sin. He says, for the Lord's sake, I'm supposed to submit to my human authorities. Submit is a strong word. You could slide in there respect, which is challenging, certainly in our political climate. But just so you understand, Peter's writing this in a time where the leaders of the world at that time would have made any of the presidents we'd ever had look like angels. And he says that your honorable lives will silence those ignorant people who make foolish accusations. So your honorable lives, the things you post, the things you say. People are watching that stuff, and it seems as if it'll help them understand the greatness of God and His grace and love. I thought it would get quiet if I read that passage. I was just curious. It's kind of fun to read, especially on a day when we're talking about biblical femininity. I thought I would distract you with something else right out the gate, get everybody nervous. You see, God has designed this planet with this flow of authority. We don't always love it because since the fall in Genesis, the flow of authority has all these flaws because men are flawed and women are flawed, and so it kind of screws up the way it was supposed to work. But when you read this passage, you can't get away from God's design, and this is God's word. This isn't like my opinion, how I feel about it. I just read it. It's right there. And the next passage actually talks about slaves of all things. Now, this isn't talking about American slavery. It's not fair to read the next verses and think about someone who's kidnapped to be a slave. This would have been an indentured servant. So it's not really like American slavery, and it's not really like your boss, right? Like it's somewhere in between. But he's just saying that's the flow of authority, and you're supposed to respect your upline. And in this passage, he particularly is advising a group of people that would have been very broad in that time, the indentured servant. And then he gets to Jesus. I want to read to you. I'm getting to you, ladies. It's coming. It's a scary way to start, isn't it? This is all in 1 Peter. For God called you to do good, even if it means suffering. Just as Christ suffered for you, he is your example, and you must follow in his steps. Check this out. He never sinned, nor ever deceived anyone. Innocent. He did not retaliate when he was insulted, nor threaten revenge when he suffered. Man did all he could to bring Jesus as much physical pain and emotional pain and humiliate him in every way, and Jesus did not strike back. You remember the first thing Jesus says on the cross? Forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. He left his case in the hands of God, who always judges fairly. Just for the record, man could not submit Jesus, right? There was no submitting Jesus. Man can't pull that off. At the end of the cross, what did Jesus say? Father, we're done here. It's finished. Into your hands, I commit my spirit. Man couldn't submit him, but God could. He left his case in the hands of God, who always judges fairly. He personally carried our sins in his body on the cross. That's an amazing line. If you remember Jesus on the cross, it's the fourth thing he says. He says, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? We often focus on the physical suffering on the cross, and it certainly was intense and painful for us to even imagine. But when God the Father pours his wrath out on his Son, the physical suffering pales. You know why? Because he had your sins in his body on the cross. And the Father pours out his wrath that was designed for sin, for me and you, pours it out on his Son on our behalf. And Jesus submits himself to the wrath of his Father, who he is beyond our comprehension, connected to as the Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. He submits to the will of the Father, to the will of the Trinity, and he takes on the wrath of the Father, as well as being separated from the Father, so that we can be dead to sin and live for what is right. By his wounds you are healed. We're going to sing a little bit again in a minute, and that should make us sing. Once we were like sheep who wandered away, but now you have turned to your shepherd, the guardian of your souls. And then we get to wives. How's that for a setup, right? We talk about this issue of submission, and this First Peter kind of puts it in a really difficult kind of way. He starts with government officials, which I'm sure all the people reading this felt the same way we do these days. He talked to a group of people that really struggled in that culture, the indentured servant. And then he puts Jesus up, as we do every Sunday, as a picture of ultimate submission. And then he speaks to wives. Don't worry, he's going to speak to husbands too. But he speaks to wives, and I think we just want to catch it right there. We're going to talk about the beauty of the relationship between a man and a woman. We're going to use a word, partner. But I like this passage because it just points back to Genesis, where everything got jacked up, and it lets us all know this world doesn't work perfectly. And so when you shine in these ways, by partnering, even submitting, brings glory to God. Wives, this is what it says. Realize everybody in here is not a wife. All right, so you know what? One of my favorite parts of last week was we've got all these single ladies that are here for the series on biblical femininity. If there was ever time to go on vacation, right, there was no husband making them be here. They're coming and they're taking this in. I'm like, that's strong right there. And this applies across the board, but we're going to read these two verses written to wives. In the same way, you wives must accept the authority of your husbands. Again, that authority flow by God's design. Then even if some refuse to obey the good news, that meaning the husbands, if they're not believers, if they don't believe the good news, your godly lives will speak to them without any words. I think that's an amazing play on words. Your lives will speak to them with no words. And they will be won over by observing your pure and reverent lives. Whew. Heavy, huh? Really glad to be up here all by myself looking at all you on the subject. I believe this so distinctly, that there's this design by God, because it's so clearly written in the Word, that we teach it to our daughters. We actually aspire this for our daughters. So I brought my daughter into town today, so I wouldn't have to sit up here all by myself and talk about this, because we taught this in our home. Mariah Reeves, love it. Son of a gun, but I'm still claiming here. 27, 2 kids, married for 5.5 years, not just 5 years.
Yeah, got to get the half in there.
She is the second all-time ACT scorer in our home. We got 6 kids. She's second. JT unseated you significantly.
Yeah. Significantly.
She is the leading scorer in the Reeves house, leading rebounder, leading steals of all time in the Reeves house, and the absolute meanest basketball player. We don't have any other, all sons, 5 sons and a daughter, the meanest player we have. You okay with that?
I would say I'm a nice person, but
yeah.
Gotta be mean out there.
Why would we teach somebody like this that's so strong this idea of partnering outside of the scripture? Saying, and by the way, this was my house, and we were together. Who is this Timmy cat anyway, right? Like, who is he to come in and for me to actually be preparing my daughter to partner with somebody that other than us? Well, because of this passage, and really, it's not just the heaviness of 1 Peter. There's this beauty and hope that we had for you. You've learned a lot on this in the last little bit.
Yeah. First, I'll acknowledge he's making fun of Timmy while he's not here.
Exactly.
Timmy can bench 405, so he's not someone you kind of make fun of.
He's slow.
No.
He's slow. I got run.
No, I just want to start out and acknowledge I'm not an expert on azering or partnering or submission.
405 in college.
But what?
He ain't bench 405 anymore. I'm messing with you.
I had to defend my husband up here. But I love talking about submission because it brings so much discomfort to women. And it's really something that can bring strength and power to women once understood rightly. So I'm excited about it, a little nervous. If I get the little shakes, just ignore it. A little about me. I'm the one, sorry, kids in here. I'm the one that said I wish my parents hadn't let me have my phone in my room. But yeah, I've been married to Timmy only 5.5 years. To some of y'all, I mean, to me it feels long, but I know it's not to a lot of people. And we are very involved in the marriage ministry at my church, the Austin Stone in Texas. And we do a lot of premarital counseling. So I thought for this, it might be helpful to just kind of go through the basics of what we talk about in premarital counseling on what is submission based on Scripture. And if we really believe Scripture is true, then we know that what it says is 100% true about who we are as women. So we can start at the beginning. Dad kind of hit on it, but Eve screwed it up for all of us. She had just sinned. She had just eaten the fruit that God said not to eat. And Genesis 3:16 says, "To the woman, I will greatly multiply your pain in childbirth. In pain you will bring forth children, yet your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you." I get the pain in childbirth thing. That's real. But what does the phrase mean, your desire will be for your husband? It is not a sexual desire, but a desire of will. So it could read, instead of submitting to your husband, you will want to control him. You will want to prevail, your will to prevail over his, and instead of letting him be the leader and the head of the family. Our longing as women for control, I doubt any of y'all want to, I really struggle with control, whether married or single, really, can cause us to manipulate relationships to further our own cause or whatever we want to get done. This is not faithful partnering. So we saw the curse where women will struggle with their calling to submit, but let's skip ahead to the New Testament where submission is actually commanded. And I just want to hit on again, Dad and Mom said it last week, but women are not called to submit to men. That is a lie. That is a twisting of the truth that has sadly been used to manipulate and abuse women in the church and in the home. It's actually a woman is called to submit to a man, a wife to her husband. So first, let's kind of look at where submission is in Scripture. It's actually in several places. First, believers submit to God. This is in James 4:7. So first, men and women, single, married, we're all called to submit to the Lord. Second, wives submit to your husbands. That's in Ephesians, Colossians, and 1 Peter. We'll kind of get to that. Well, Dad hit 1 Peter. Third, believers submit to governing authorities. Romans 13:1. Fourth, all believers submit to elders in the church. That's Hebrews 13:17. Fifth, young people submit to godly authority. That's 1 Peter 5:5, and there's more. But the gist is we all submit. Wives have a special calling of submission to their husbands, though. So we'll kind of look at those passages, starting in Ephesians 5:22 through 24. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself his Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. This can be really uncomfortable because the word submission itself, seems demeaning. A lot of people will see it as weak, passive, or even cowardice. But as Dad said earlier, Scripture shows Christ's submission as like the ultimate, most powerful thing submitting to the Father and letting himself be killed on the cross. It was not easy physically, psychologically, mentally, and how grateful are we that Christ submitted? So what is submission? I think we should step back and look at the definition. I looked at a few definitions, and Grace Church, which Dad's been using a lot of their stuff, they define submission as voluntarily humbling of oneself in order to elevate another. The Austin Stone calls submission strength under restraint. Desiring God says submission is willingly coming under the authority of another. Andrea Crick, I don't know if she's here, but she said submission is relinquishing selfishness to something better. And my grandma said James 3:17, submission is willing to yield.
I think Russell got to you. He likes definitions.
This is for you, Russell.
It's like 5 definitions. Hey,
I mean, they all got to tie together. It's incredibly difficult submission because it means strong, capable women are giving up their control and willing to not decide everything and let their husband lead, to put their control under. I think a good example is when I first married Timmy, I was trying to be a great submissive wife, and I said, I will go anywhere in the world with you. Africa, South America, he was like, Antarctica? And I was like, yes, even Antarctica, but I will not go to Austin, Texas with you. And a year later, he was like, I think we should go to Austin. And I'm like, of all the places in the whole world, I did not submit perfectly because I kind of said, I'll go with you, but if it fails, it's your fault. This is on you. And that was not good partnering. That was not good submission. But I think later the Lord kind of worked on me, and I was finally able to ask him non-accusatory questions like, why are we going? What do you want our family to look like? What will we do there? And it enabled me to kind of get the picture more. And the Lord really led me to feel like it was the right thing to do. Submission is not silent. It's not silently going along with whatever your husband said. That is passive. To truly come alongside your husband is to communicate truth, insight, and seek to understand where he is leading. So to just withhold an objection or silence yourself is not godly or noble. It is not enabling a man to be a strong leader. But also nitpicking on the other side, where it's every single thing you gotta say, that also doesn't allow him to be a strong man. So there's this beautiful in-between of submission where it's not passive and not over-assessing everything. So I would say we need godly community and other women who can help us kind of see if we're tending to lean one way or another. Okay, and the last passage I'll hit on is Colossians 3:18. It says, wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord. This verse puts in perspective who is being honored when we submit. It's not just about bringing your strength to your husband and partnering. It's actually submitting to the Lord. So that's an excellent reminder when we feel like our decision would be better than our husband's, because sometimes it would be. I think everyone knows that in here. But our husbands are not perfect. They do not always make the best decisions. But this does not mean we only submit when it seems like a good choice. Because we submit to the Lord, we acknowledge the one who is ultimately in control when we submit to our husband's leadership. We trust that God will guide them even though they're broken, and that he is more than able to do what he needs without our help or our control of the situation. So this is a really cool display of strength under restraint and even faith.
Perfect. Hey, I just want to acknowledge again, because I can feel it when we're talking. Most of us don't live in a perfect scenario. Matter of fact, none of us do. But some of us live in a lot harder situation than others. I appreciate you. This is one thing to talk about. It's another thing to live. And some of y'all have lived through this in really, really difficult ways. Andy Stanley talks about marriage. He uses a pretty interesting phrase. I love it. He says it's a race to the back of the line. So that means that I'm racing Cheryl to get back to the back of the line, and she's racing me to the back of the line. We're really, in many ways, submitting to one another because we're for one another. And we sure as heck don't do that perfectly, right? And it gets really complicated when one person is always racing to the back of the line and the other never races to the back of the line. And just having done this for a long time, there's a lot of pain there, ladies. Some of y'all have carried that, and thank you for doing that. Because even there, even when you're the only one racing to the back of the line, you shine like a light to the glory of God. And there's certainly times where that actually crosses some lines. And those are whole nother conversations. But we really want to establish this idea. We just went ahead and jumped in there and used the word submission. Usually people are a little afraid that it's a biblical word. It's been abused. We're not supporting any of the abuse of that word. We're actually trying to hold it high as this thing that has power, and by God's design, as authority flows, brings him glory, and actually also brings health. So another word we use is partner. We've been using that for a while here at Radius. We call you partners. If you've joined instead of members, we call you partners. Like, we're doing this together. We're putting our strengths together for the sake of Lexington, so that they could hear the gospel, the good news about Jesus. And that's certainly how a marriage works. And when for some of y'all, you've heard of this passage in the Bible. It's Proverbs 31. People call it the Proverbs 31 woman. But it's actually being written to a man as he's looking for a woman. And so it's got this, it's not supposed to be read like a checklist, like she's got to meet all this criteria, because that's really dangerous for you ladies to read it that way, because then you're just going to fail. And fellas, if you've read it, you can't hold that over somebody. That's not how it works. But it does set a precedent for what it looks like to be a healthy partner in marriage and beyond. And we don't have time to read through the whole passage. It's terrific if you got time to read it. I'll just give you kind of 4 highlights, and you can speak in as you think of it. Four things that come out of the passage. This is a lady she's just really active, and she's intentional. Like when you think submissive, I think a lot of times it gets abused, and no, this lady is out and she's getting it done. Yeah,
I think I heard a lot of y'all women in here are managers, directors, VPs, CEOs, whatever, wherever you're at work. It made me think, one of my good friends, she's a single lady. She's a manager at Oracle. She's over about 20 people. It rotates like every 6 months to a year. So she's got a lot of people kind of coming in and out. And she partners so well, coming alongside her employees and helping them develop skills and hone in their strengths so that they can get promoted, basically. And some of them are up where she is now. But I remember her coming to me so distraught once, because there was a young man who she was managing who was just making a lot of bad decisions. He was wording emails poorly, a bunch of things like that. And she was trying to come alongside him and help him to be more successful in the workplace, and he was not accepting her help. But ultimately, her partnering was excellent, like how she was pursuing, going after this person, and how she was really helping her team become better. I think it's so powerful to see women who are holding various positions use their womanhood to come alongside people and pour into them and make them greater. And keep it up. All y'all out there, keep it up, because it's really cool to see.
So she's active and intentional. The Proverbs 31 woman is patient, and she's steadfast. I can't think of anything more appropriate than to talk about being a mother when you talk about being patient and steadfast. You learned a little bit about this.
A little bit. Yeah, I have a 1.5-year-old and a 5-month-old, and I'm just starting to grasp what patience actually means. So all the moms out there, I just want to acknowledge like how cool it is to see moms who are disciplining, loving, encouraging, correcting their kids. And when you look at Proverbs 31, that is you. Like, that is patient and steadfastness. It's amazing.
Big time. I always want you to feel that appreciation. I don't know if we give it enough, the work of a parent, fathers and mothers, but particularly moms. A lot of times all your work kind of gets washed, and people don't see it. But to do that for 18, 20, I'm learning that I thought it was going to end at 18 and like I'm off the hook. But to continue to do that, you talk about patient and steadfast, seeking to launch, right? And not call for them to need you. It's really interesting. When you read Proverbs 31, she's not working or building this thing to gain independence. She's actually doing it in a partnering way. In the same way with her children, she's partnering with her children so she can launch them, not hold them. It's powerful. It's really interesting when you read Proverbs 31. Mariah said this earlier, that she's not silent. She actually has a voice for a lot of wives in the room, like finding your voice is really interesting. So for some of y'all, finding your voice means you need to talk less, right? Like, I'm not talking about total words, but like how the words, and in others, it takes a while to find your voice to talk enough, to have input. And that's all part of maturing. That's who we are. We're a body of believers and we're maturing. All of us at our own rate. So when I bust on the comments politically earlier, I'm sure that I heard a couple of you, but this is just a moment, hey, where we look in the mirror and we grow. We examine our lives and we grow. And so Proverbs 31, instead of reading it and holding it like this list, like I either made an A+ or I failed, it's more like this, hey, that's something to aspire to. I want to grow. I want to ask God to help me grow. And then what I've heard from a number of y'all, particularly ladies in small groups, is it's just really good to be around other women that are on the same path, because the world's saying the opposite of Proverbs 31. It's saying strive to be independent so you don't need anybody, because people are going to fail you. And sure enough, don't depend on a man. Right? That's what the world's saying. So when you sit in a group, somebody shared, I caught one of the small groups here just this Sunday, and she came out and said, what's one thing you'd say to all the ladies? She said, I'll just tell them how good that group was, because we just sat in there and we talked about this. And I need some people going the same direction as me. It's encouraging. Proverbs 31, woman is incredibly wise. So when you read it, you can't help but think that this contribution to her family, as I've witnessed in my family, Cheryl has this wisdom that I don't have. Like I want to be wise, and so I provide a part, and when we partner, that there's this deep wisdom. You've gained some wisdom. You're only 27, so you can only be so wise. No offense. Oh yeah. Right.
No,
but
no offense.
How are you gaining wisdom?
Yeah. I love resources, so I'll just give y'all some resources. For podcasts, this is for guys and girls, men and women, sorry. Ask Pastor John. Pastor John's not this John. It's John Piper.
It's not
Ask
near
Pastor
as good
John.
as mine, but no.
Is excellent. It's 10 minutes, so you can listen to it anytime, really short. There's like 1,000 questions he addresses about everything. So I would recommend that. Java with Julie is excellent for sex and sexuality and for married and single women. Risen Motherhood is great for moms. Instagram, podcast, and book. Instagram, if you're an Instagram person. Jackie Hill Perry is excellent to follow. She puts out short videos. Priscilla Shire, Authentic Intimacy, The Gospel Coalition. There's so many great resources to follow, and with technology, there's a lot of access, so would definitely encourage y'all to kind of look into.
I'm learning these things. There was no Instagram when I was growing up. They have computers when you were growing up? I didn't think they did. Phones? Oh, I'm just kidding. Oh, you climbed the pole, talk on the phone? Yeah, all right. No, things have changed. So there's these resources. So to grow in wisdom, you can read and you can take stuff in and you can listen, which is new to all of us that are a little older. Like the podcast availability is pretty amazing. I know a lot of our folks in my age category and older, we've started to enjoy that and take in stuff. And you grow in wisdom. But one of the very best ways, find somebody in this room or a room that you know that has hit some marks you want to hit and go, let me take you down to Creekside and let's have breakfast. I want to learn from you. Both are really valid. We're getting out of Proverbs 31. What's your favorite verse? Favorite verse, Proverbs 31.
I like 31:25. It says of a godly woman, she laughs at the time to come. And John Piper commented on it. I love it. He says she laughs at everything the future will bring and might bring because she hopes in God. And that's just so cool. That's all I have to say about it. It's cool.
Quoting John Piper. I'm not sure she's listening to us, Russell. We've used the word partner a bunch. It's not just about marriage. And this is probably the part of this little talk I was most excited about. Having my daughter up here is partnering started way before. I cried at the wedding, didn't I?
You did.
Way before she got married. And younger ladies in the room, and even if you're not married and you're older, there's this amazing thing you do with people in your radius that just blesses the world and represents God. And I got to experience that as a father, having my daughter partner with me and my family in our home. It was just, sorry to my sons, I don't think any of them are here today, so not to crack on them, it was just different from her. After basketball, Mariah played high school basketball. I would, one of my favorite memories of my life is her walking up into the stands and sitting with me after the game. She would always come sit right beside me, and we process the game, which I've done with all my sons. We all do the same thing. Mariah just did it different. With the boys we're evaluating, you'd have to hear us. It'd probably bore you to tears. With Mariah, it was more like we did it together, and it was great. One game in particular, I'm not sure if you remember this, but I look out on the court, and my lovely daughter has her fist pulled back like this, and she's got this girl like this, and somebody breaks it up. She's about to punch her in the mouth. As a father, I probably should have been, I was kind of proud in the moment, but she had it that. But so when she came to have this visit with me, she's coming, I can still remember it like it was yesterday, these brown bleachers. She's walking up the bleachers, looking at me right in the eye. You remember what you said?
Don't pull a girl's hair.
That's exactly right. She said,
Don't.
Daddy, you don't pull a girl's hair. I'm like, okay, baby, whatever you say. Have a seat.
Y'all, she pulled my ponytail so I fell all the way, like it pulled me all the way to the ground. So I said if I ever get mad enough to get in a fight, I'm going to win. But I feel like that's fair.
She got that from me. Yeah. But as a daughter, as we talked about it over the week, there's just this interesting approach to the family. Can you share anything? Like, there's a bunch of young ladies in our room. Yeah.
I love that you want me to talk about being a daughter. I remember actually we talked about Azair specifically when I was in high school, and I remember thinking, oh, like that mental note for in a few years. Like, it's not really relevant right now. And I wish I had thought about it more because of how powerful being a partner is in middle school, high school, even elementary school. And I think the Lord still works through us in way. Like, I know I partnered, as Dad gave an example, even though I didn't realize what it was. But I did know the purpose of our family was to glorify God and also to just have a healthy family environment. And so I realized first off that not everyone's family looks like that. So for me, it was probably a little easier than some of y'all. But the premise of partnering is the same regardless. It's that we bring glory to God. And so for y'all doing that in a tough situation, like, props to y'all. And I really think the Lord will bless you for your faithfulness in that. It's incredibly difficult, but so powerful. But practically, this meant for me to partner with my mom and dad is to open up and to get over myself in high school. I don't know why. It's really hard to open up. And so when I hid things, which I know it's shocking, but I hid things going on, my relationship with y'all suffered and my relationship with the Lord suffered. It wasn't just me hiding things and everything was fine. And so a specific thing I remember was walking with Mom. I remember it was nighttime because I was crying and I was happy it was nighttime. So people couldn't see me. And just opening up about how hard it was to not have godly friends and how alone I felt and lonely. Ooh, I'm getting emotional. Trying to do the right thing, and all the young women here, trying to do the right thing alone is really, really hard. I remember things like sneaking out, using my phone in my room, secret relationships, body image. If you're alone in that, it makes it so much more difficult. So opening up to y'all allowed me to start processing, and it does allow a sort of friendship and accountability. Another thing I remember is opening up to you about finances in college. I don't know if anyone's making college decisions, but just, should I go to the college I really want to go to and go in debt, or should I go for free? And that was just really good to process out loud. And then I remember being with my best friend and really wanting to spend the night. It was not the plan. And I took forever trying to think, how should I call my dad so I could convince him that I need to spend the night? And I called you, and what did you say to me?
I spelled manipulation.
All that to say, I did not. I went home that night. And I knew it was wrong, but I can say elementary, middle, high school girls, you may not know the definition of manipulation, but you know how to do it. It just comes naturally. And manipulation is one of the most destructive ways to partner wrongly. If you come alongside and manipulate someone to do what you want and pursue your own goal instead of something greater, it's so dangerous, but it's worth fighting against. And it comes naturally, so it's not like the end of the world if you do it, but just try to recognize it and fight against it because it really can tear the family apart. It's not healthy.
I was most excited about that because we got so many students, so many young ladies. You have this powerful spot in your family that you probably hadn't quite figured out. I mean, you'll figure it out more later, which is cool because it's a process. I want you to feel it. Like there's power connected to how you relate in your home, at school. You just got a different approach to it. And a lot of times we talk about it in the wrong way. I want you to hear it as powerful. We sent Mariah away to college, so then she's separate from us. I hear stories that she went way far away to Chicago. So most parents in the room, you don't want your kid to do that, right? But my daughter went to Chicago. I heard these stories of her standing at doors, because she's from the South, waiting for other male students to open the door for her. Turns out she was flirting, right? Like that's really what that was. But
It was effective.
it was effective. But, you know, it was one of the moments where it's this cool thing, ladies, like that. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like, we don't do all this perfect, but standing there waiting for a guy to open the door for you actually helps us be who we are. And so that happens in the home, but it even happens before you're in the home when you hold a guy to some higher standard. Flirt, I don't know about the flirting part, but like holding them to a higher standard, like you could walk in front of me and do this for me, and actually makes them, you just have this ability to bring that into the world. Remembering the beginnings of this church, there are 10, 15 single, 20-something ladies that in a partnering way help build this place. We talked about this last week. If you want their names, ask Kim Lyle. She knows them all. She was one of them. They just worked and they served and they loved and they cared for people and they made this place inviting. But they did it in a partnering way. Believe me, I've heard a couple things from Kim Lyle I won't repeat, right? Like she's mad about something. Like she's partnering with this thing. She's so passionate about Radius, and she wanted to say something because she was trying to find her voice. Now, that voice has matured a lot since she was 22, right? But they helped build this thing. You got at least a couple of them invested in you.
Yeah, Sarah Ashland, her name's Plemming. I don't remember what it was before. But she was in college. She was at USC, and I was 11, and she spent time with me. I remember walking with her. We, swam in the lake together. It's so cool to look back and say this college girl spent time with an 11-year-old, and she was who I wanted to be. And then in high school, Jess Shuford, she's now at the downtown Southside campus. She spent time with me. She had little kids, and she was who I wanted to be. So to y'all who are partnering with younger women, it means so much and it impacts them. I mean, I remember vividly hanging out with them. It was really, really neat.
So we thank you all for what you do for us as a body, for what we do for our town, for our families. I got this 5 minutes left, and it's the hard part. I'm going to talk about sexual intimacy and some of those things. You want to stay?
See ya.
Yeah, I see how it is. Man, we've used a number of words. Submit, which even it just sounds tough. Partner, which sounds a little bit more positive. And yet we just really want to argue they're both positive, done by design from the very beginning, going back to Genesis. And in the garden, there were no flaws, right? The husband and wife, there was no tension. By the time you get to chapter 3 in Genesis, then it gets hard. Work gets hard. Relationship gets hard. Childbirth gets hard. All those things get difficult. And they've remained that. So some of the things that were created beautiful in the garden, they get attacked. And so a lot of times when we talk about men and women in marriage, there's a book written called Love, because there's this expectation that for a lady, one of the deepest needs of her heart is to be loved. And then it's really interesting when you hear guys rank the things they need. If you kind of slide them under one header, it'd be respect. Love, we both need love and we both need respect. But if you were going to show the difference between us by design, you could take love for the lady and respect for the man. You'd be pretty close. So when it gets to something like sexual intimacy, you got both of those things at play. The man is got to show love. Cheryl always says that sex starts in the kitchen. Like, I better have something to say good when I get to the house, right? I better show up with some roses on occasion. When we started Radius, we had this group of young couples that we hung out with. Cheryl hung out with the ladies a lot, and I hung out with the guys. And I would get the guys to take roses home, which I didn't do a lot myself, so I was actually growing while I was leading. And so they'd start taking roses, and then Cheryl would give the ladies some homework. I'll leave some of that homework undefined, right? But it had to do with their attire in the evenings. We'll leave it like that. And so after lots of conversations with back and forth, one of the guys comes to me. He says, I bought roses for my wife, but I think I need to send a couple to your wife for those conversations they're having. Ladies, just speaking for the men, and I want to do this carefully because this can be done so wrong, and you have been taken advantage of in this way so many times. But when it comes to respect, this thing of sexual intimacy for a man is intense. It is one of the ways I feel the most respected. Like, we always want to make it all about all this other stuff, but Cheryl's affirmation of me in that is huge for me, and it is for most every man I've ever talked to. We won't go into a whole lot of detail on it, but I just want you to hear it. I don't want to come up short. It's a big deal. When we talk about respect, that's a piece of it. I can tell you the times I felt most disrespected in my home. Cheryl allowed me to do this because this doesn't happen a ton, but when she chastises me in front of the kids, it's a crushing blow. And I'll be straight with you. I'm a fighter, so she knows it. I am ready to go to the mat right now in that moment. But I have to kill that inside of me because I know that's not good for my kids to hear. So I have to try to kill that. But there is nothing, I don't know, maybe there's something. But for me particularly, when it comes to respect, that thing. So when you think partnering, there's all this joy and help from partnering. Hopefully Mariah caught some of that for you. But then there's like just these disciplines too. So for us, like, I'll be like, you give the wink wink in front of the kids, and sometimes Cheryl blow through the stop sign, right? Yeah, sometimes she blow through it. And then most of the time, we'd hold it, or we just leave the kids at the table and let's go do this somewhere else. I've told you, the closet's great. There's lots of clothes in there. All the sound like gets muffled. I know none of y'all even need that advice, but nonetheless. Hey, there's some legitimacy to this word called nagging. So, like, we think about it oftentimes as just a pain, but I want you ladies to think about how it undermines your husband's confidence. And for that matter, anybody in your vicinity. It can be your kids, it can be your coworkers. How you use your mouth and the words that come out of your mouth, they can either build or they can destroy. Proverbs got all kind of verses, all kind of metaphors. They call it a dripping faucet. I'd rather be on the corner of a rooftop. I've always imagined that. Am I hanging onto the gutter? How does that passage work? He says, I'd rather be in a desert land than hear somebody nag. That's how they torture people, right? Like this is a torture thing. So it's just something for us to, really check and check hard. I'll read you one proverb that's painful. I can't, ladies, I'm always hard on the guys. I got to at least read a couple things that are hard for y'all. A quarrelsome wife, 25:17, is as annoying as a constant dripping on a rainy day. Real positive verse for you. Stopping her complaints is like stopping the wind. You ever tried? Trying to hold something with greased hands. Again, none of this is done perfect. I'm looking at a lot of people in the room that come up short, male and female. We're all fighting in this life since the fall in the garden to be like him, which means we race to the back of the line. And sometimes that's out of discipline. We work these disciplines into our life. And sometimes it's out of great joy that we race to the back of the line. love ending something like this by going back to where we started. We started with Jesus. We almost started with Jesus. We got to Jesus really quick. The ultimate one who raced to the back of the line on behalf of all mankind. He submitted to the Father's will and was executed on the cross with great suffering to set us free. See, he's actually, through his gift on the cross, redeemed us, and we're more like we were in the garden than we've ever been in history since the cross. Now, all I got to do is come to your house and you order some mine. We ain't there yet. But one day when we meet the Savior in heaven, we'll be completely made whole again. And some of these things we don't have to talk about because it's all pure again. Thank you for walking this road. And ladies, thank you for sitting there and listening to these words and letting them wash over you.